Hi, welcome to the Nurture Nature Show. I am the Reverend Dr. LoraKim Joyner of One Earth Conservation and Ministry. I serve as wildlife veterinarian and Unitarian Universalist minister. During our time together, we will have a chance to nurture ourselves so that we can nurture all of nature. Welcome into this community of hope and nourishment and solidarity with all of life. Hi, I'm the Reverend Dr. LoraKim Joyner.
And I'm Reverend Dr. Meredith Garmon.
We are both Unitarian Universalist ministers.
And we're also married to each other.
We are, and so I'm so glad that you're here today because Meredith, as a philosophy professor and a Unitarian Universalist minister, has got some wonderful ideas and perspectives on talking about multi-species intelligence, which is our topic for today. And what is multi-species intelligence? Well, it's being able to look at what the feelings and needs are of other species so we can better understand them. And we use communication, we use behavioral studies, cognitive ethology, so we can not so much communicate with them, but understand how we can better address their well-being. And of course, this is an important topic today with extinction and the loss of biodiversity and various welfare issues. But it's also important for how we consider the human species. For instance, when I do my work as a wildlife veterinarian in Latin America, I'm often hearing about, oh, those people who poach animals or hunt animals or do this or do that or destroy the habitats. We're denigrating our own species, and it seems to get in the way with how we can have constructive, synergistic conservation, because conservation is all about people. And I think it drags our own energy down as well when we are saying that those people or the human species is bad because they're wiping out everything. And I hear that a lot as a wildlife veterinarian. And I do believe that if we need to look at all species, how they all have inherent worth and dignity. And so that's my perspective of why it's important today. Why do you think we're talking about this today, Meredith?
Well, part of what we're wanting to do is bridge the sense of disconnect. A sense of healing and wholeness can come to us if we feel a better sense of connection with the people around us, the other beings around us, all the species around us. One of the ideas that's in our minds that we use to evaluate ourselves and others is evil. It's a big topic in the history of theology and religion. Where does it come from? What is it? And I find that over and over, evil is used as a shutdown for conversation, as something that we say when we don't want to understand or explain what's going on. We just call it evil, and there's no understanding necessary. That point was brought home to me particularly strongly on September 11th, 2001, when the terrorist attacks happened. I was with a group of people, and I mentioned that I wish I better understood what would lead someone to want to fly an airplane into a building. And somebody else in the group said, oh, but you do believe in evil, don't you? As if all we have to do is call it evil, and then we don't have to investigate anymore. We don't have to be curious about knowing or understanding or explaining anything further about it. We call something evil when we hate something so much that we're afraid that if we understood it, we wouldn't be able to hate it anymore.
Well, you mentioned fear, Meredith, and I think that's a big part of why we other animals, why we say that they're evil or are our own kind because of fear. And I think it distances us from all of life. For instance, there's a new growing field where we study about how humans are afraid of death. We don't want to die and suffer and be part of the predator-prey cycle like other animals are. And so we're afraid of death. We move away from it. And what that does is we say, well, existence is out to get us. Existence is evil, is bad. And so we disconnect ourselves from belonging to this whole community of animals and life because, well, we don't want to die. We don't want to suffer. And so we tell the story that humans are fundamentally different. And part of that message is that we are fundamentally wrong as well.
I really do see disconnection as the essential problem of our age and perhaps of earlier ages as well. It has been traditional to diagnose what's wrong with the human condition as what's wrong with humans as sin. The traditional religions characterize humans as having a fundamentally sinful nature, and whatever's going wrong in the world, it's because there's some kind of inner corruption of who we are that's going on. And I look at the world very, very differently. When I see things going wrong, I see it as disconnection playing itself out. We're not feeling connected to other people, to our environment, to other species, and we feel isolated, and we are isolated, and we feel alienated because we are alienated, and all of that flows from just wanting to protect ourselves. That's a reasonable strategy, but the payoff has been that we're distancing ourselves from other beings.
And so part of that distancing from other beings is also tied in how we distance ourselves from our own kind. You know, I'm thinking about, you know, if we don't accept reality and death and suffering and predator-prey and that harm is part of the natural cycle, then we push it on to other animals and say, those animals are bad or those people are bad. Anyone who's different from us is bad, and it disconnects us from belonging and maybe offering a compassionate response. And I know it's hard. It's really hard work to do in the time of terrorism, our political divide in the United States. How is it that we can see the others have inherent worth and dignity even when they vote different from us?
Well, we certainly do have division coming out of the last election. We have it every election, but it seems to be worse. We don't feel connected to those people who voted differently from the way we voted or have been. And as I look at the prospects for the administration to come, it looks like there may be further division, further blaming and othering of groups that we want to pin the blame on. So how can remembering that humans too are animals, help us feel a connection that would have political implications?
Mm-hmm. Well, I think that's right. You know, people often say, why are you taking care of animals when the condition for humanity is so tough these days all over the world? How can that possibly help? Well, I really feel that if we can not see evil or harm in other species, we're getting at the root cause of where we see evil and harm in our own kind. And so if we can welcome all species, I believe it gives us more edge, more compassion, more room to welcome one another in these really hard times and try to get through what we can, because I believe we can get better. Steven Pinker wrote a book, The Better Angels of Our Nature, and he says, listen, we're still like who we were millions of years ago, but he charted the decrease in violence during that time over from when we were hunter-gatherers into now, and the violence has fallen. We're much less violent than we've ever been before, just because we evolved to rape and torture and perhaps be cannibals and murder and go to war, that we use cultural expectations and empathy and laws to shift that and say we don't allow that anymore. But if we lose sight that we are capable of that harm, Steven Pinker says, then we can easily flash back and lose everything when we revert to our tribalism that wishes harm upon all others who are not like us. In other words, all those who are evil from us. So I really believe in this day and age, in the United States and in other parts of the world where we have political faction, is to really look hard at what does it mean to be human, which is partly multi-species intelligence. And I would love to show some slides right now of various kinds of animals, of how they're like us.
Well, let's see them.
Let's just go ahead and do that. So first, let's go ahead and take a look at murder. And so all kinds of animals do murder. And this is just a couple examples. Dolphins, yes, they murder their own kind. They murder younger dolphins. They murder babies. And they murder dolphins of other species for no reason that we can understand that it's to their advantage. So there's one species that's involved in murder. And then there are others too, if we can go ahead and do this. This is siblicide. This is when you kill your brothers and your sisters, which has been an ancient story from way back when for our kind in ancient scriptures. And many birds do this and other animals do this well, showing a picture of beloved bluefoot boobies, and one chick will kill the other chick. And so yes, there's murder and siblicide. And then there's also, let's talk about the otters. They're just sea otters. Who cannot love a sea otter? Well, they also do murder, and they also do kidnapping. The males will kidnap a young otter pup and hold that otter pup for ransom until a female brings him food, like another fish or something like that. Otters will also, they will murder their own kind, and what happens an awful lot is during sexual coercion, and they will, in other words, it's what we would call rape, that 10% of the time a male otter will kill a female during copulation. And not only will they kill their own kind or their own mate because they're so rough, they will actually kill other species, seals, for instance, baby seals, and kill them during an act of forced sexual coercion. And so rape, as we know it, is across the animal kingdom. Yeah, boy, let's just keep on going, shall we? Let's talk about others who kidnap. Oh, and yes, well, penguins, we love our penguins, don't we? Well,
yeah.
They're like the otters. They also are involved in sexual coercion. And let's hear about, we talked about otters that did kidnapping, and so let's go ahead and take another look at those otters and how that they're involved with kidnapping. But there's another species that kidnaps of other species, and it isn't just the otters. If we look at our next slide, there are baboons, and what baboons will do is they will go and steal puppies from the wild dogs or the feral dogs that are in their area, and they will raise that puppy. They forcibly remove that puppy from the family because they want a pet. They want a companion animal and maybe someone who'll be part of their tribe. And so there's kidnapping in the animal kingdom. Okay, so what about torture? You know, what do we mean by torture? It sort of means causing harm without any apparent evolutionary reason why that would be. And so all kinds of species here showing pilot whales that are involved with torturing their prey. And we've all heard about cats playing with mice, and we're not really quite sure why they do it, but they do. And so humans aren't the only ones that are involved with things like this. And what about lying and cheating and stealing? Do you think other animals do that?
There's a lot of deception that goes on in the animal kingdom.
There's a lot of deception. And so some of our prime examples is, well, before we talk about deception there, let's go ahead and talk about deception right now, and then we'll go back to the revenge piece. I guess you want revenge when you've done some deception. Is hiding things and telling lies. We often have done studies with our jays, how they will, if they know someone's watching them, they won't hide their stash of food, but they'll pretend to hide something and actually come back and move it when no one's watching. So they're not participating in a group level. And they've also found that in chimpanzees and other primates as well, is that they will hide their banana if they think someone's looking and make a game out of that and cause deception. And the slide that we missed was on revenge, is that this is a story about baboons who a person happened, killed a baboon out of this one troop. And so those baboons waited on the side of the road for that particular human 2 days later to come back, and they attacked and they mauled that human. They remembered, and they, if we can call this revenge, they definitely had a cognitive process about that. So, wow, that's a lot of harmful behavior, what we might even call evil. And what I have learned is that every time someone says humans are the only ones who do such and such bad behavior, the more we learn, the more we're able to find out that they do and actually do it.
Well, from one side, we keep learning that traits that we thought of as human are often manifested in the animal kingdom. On the other side, our own vaunted rationality, we are now understanding, isn't quite what we always might have grown up thinking that it was. So the non-human animals have more of the traits like humans, and something like rationality, well, humans really aren't nearly as rational as we think we are. We know that decisions get made in your brain before you're conscious of them. You think you're in charge, you think you're deciding, but we know from brain scans that the motor signal to move your arm in a certain way is already going out before your conscious brain becomes aware of that decision. And then it makes up a story after the fact about how, oh, that's what you intended to do. So most of what we do that we think of as intentional action, that is intentional action, that intentionality is a product of a story that we created, that we just fabricated, made up after the fact. For the most part, we're not nearly as rationally directed as that story makes us out to be.
And that's one of the big things when I show people all the examples of animals doing these harmful behaviors. They go, well, humans don't have to do it. We're rational, like you just said. And what we're finding out is animals are a lot more rational, use a lot more cognitive process than we ever thought of. And we're learning that we actually use less than we ever thought of. And so that's not so much a difference, is maybe we really don't have as much choice as we think we do about our actions.
So, what a fix we're in.
we're really in a fix with this. It's so true. And so humans, maybe we don't have as much choice. Maybe we're not as rational as we'd like to think we can be. And so would you say that humans are more fundamentally flawed than other species?
Well, flawed is our own concept that we use to try to encourage ourselves to behave better. We point out what we call flaws in one another. We are driven by the same desires and impulses that other mammals and to a broader extent, even other vertebrates and other animals are driven by. We have the same mix of trying to be self-protective. We are also a social species, and that means that part of the way we have to protect ourselves is by getting along with others. So we're constantly working at that delicate balance of how much to do things that benefit others and how much to just pay attention to protecting ourselves, and how to do that within a context of connecting. Because, as I was saying before, LoraKim, a disconnection is our fundamental problem. It's our fundamental issue. It's our fundamental unhappiness in modern life. And everything we've been talking about today is tools to help us understand our basic similarity to, and hence our basic connection with other animals, and through that same way to other people too.
Right, and maybe not thinking that we are these fundamentally flawed people. People will also say, well, okay, we're suffering from disconnection, and we don't have as much choice and rational decision as we thought. But humans are still fundamentally flawed because we are the only species that can kill off the entire planet and change the climate. change and have all these things that are going on. And it has actually, if we go back and look through the history of evolution and the great extinction, such as during the Devonian period about 350 million years ago, we find that all kinds of species were part of the changing atmosphere and climate that caused great extinctions. Up to 75% of vertebrates went extinct during the Devonian period. And they link that to the increase in production of oxygen and the change of habitats because of trees. And so trees were part of a mass extinction that led today. And of course, way back when, the previous bacteria were all not living without oxygen, and their waste product was oxygen. And so they basically made their whole environment toxic and killed themselves off, and a whole other group of animals, bacteria that could process oxygen and live with it, developed. So
long before there were any humans, long before there were any primates or even mammals, there were species that were spewing out their waste product. And their waste product is what we call oxygen. But it was toxic to all the other beings at the time. Mm-hmm. So there were species that were killing off the planet. Mm-hmm. And there have been, you mentioned the Devonian extinction, there have been 5 periods of mass extinction in human history, 5 periods before humans arrived on the scene. So we're playing, if humans are engaged in activities that are destroying the planet, and we certainly are endangering it, this isn't the first time the planet has gone through this.
But let's not do it, shall we?
I think it would be better, all things considered, to avoid a 6th mass extinction.
And so one of the tools to avoid that is what you talked about, is our problem with disconnection, and how having multi-species intelligence can help us connect. And so I want to leave people with a little tool that they can do homework on. And this would be critical anthropomorphism. And I want to explain what that is, as we show in our next slide. Critical anthropomorphism means we try to avoid 2 kinds of problems. One problem is to say we're exactly like other species, such as these people dressing up as dogs and cats. We are them, and that's taking it too far. And then the other error that we do, that critical anthropomorphism shows us, as we see in the next slide, is that we say they're exactly like us, or that we're nothing like them. That is, that we are nothing like them. So the 2 errors are, they are nothing like us, we are completely different, and the other error is they're completely like us. We just project our own humanness on it. So what we see in the last slide, what we're trying to do with critical anthropomorphism, is study and observe our animals. What are they feeling and need? Such as this study that came out with dogs' tails wagging. We've known dogs wag their tails forever, but it's only in recent years that we've been able to see if they wag more to one side, it means get away and distress, and if they wag more to the other side, it means that they are happy. There's a bias in the way they wag their tail. So we really want to be able to know our animals so that we can know ourselves. And so we can use our rationality for that. I believe you call it imaginative anthropomorphism.
Well, right. Part of what we want to do, part of what's called for, is imagination. To take that step of imagining ourselves in the other position. All the world's religions have this golden rule: do unto others as you would have them do unto you. As you would have them do unto you if you were in that situation. It's an imaginative exercise to put yourself into another's situation. John Dewey said that imagination is more moral than moralities, by which he meant that we become good through that capacity to imagine ourselves in other situations, rather than through some list of rules, some list of moralities. It's not about rules, it's about that empathetic connection. On the other hand, we can imagine things that aren't there. We can project our own feelings on others. We can figure that the dog has the same reaction to some politician on the TV screen that we're having. And that's just projecting our judgments and emotions onto other animals. So we have to mix the imagination or combine that imaginative capacity with a critical understanding. How far is too far? When am I simply projecting my own stuff? What does the science tell us about what's really going on? So there's imagination and also the learning and the science and keeping up with what we know about what other species are like.
And if we can develop those skills with other species, we can do it for ourselves. And we can have a long and flourishing future for this species and for others. Let's do it, shall we?
I'd be in favor of that, yes.
Okay, so that's all we have for today. And I thank you all for attending. And we're going to leave you with some more tools and some more ideas on how to go forward with multi-species intelligence. And our next episode, we will continue on this theme. So we have our reflection questions, and you can put this on pause, find other people to talk about it, journal with this. And Meredith, why don't you read those for us?
Which species do you like more than others, and why? And does how you think about other species impact how you treat them, and in what way? How would thinking of humans as animals help you care for yourself and others of all species?
And then we also have some suggested actions that you can do. Share what you heard in this episode and go talk to others. How are you different or similar to their views? And what good or harm does it do to think that humans are the only ones who ever do X, Y, and Z? Does that help or hurt to talk like that? And read all about animal behavior and evolution and interpersonal neurobiology and cognitive ethology to broaden your multi-species perspectives. And let's end with this invitation. If you'd like to know more about nurturing nature, please join us. It's a lifelong pursuit. And so we have this television show, but we also need community for support, motivation, and practice. So please join One Earth by forming or joining a Nurture Nature community. And we do have one here in White Plains, and it meets January 29, 2017, Sunday at 2 p.m. Look for us on Meetup Group. And if we don't see you there, we will see you next month, and we'll see you, Meredith, too. And thanks again, everyone, for coming.